All right. So, welcome to the second class. The eLearn site should be working now, right? And I think I've had those of you who emailed me saying that you haven't enrolled in the course. If you haven't enrolled in the course and you would like access to the eLearn site, you should email me, right? I can add you in manually. Okay. So, anyone like Angry Birds? Angry Birds. What about SpongeBob? Ah, SpongeBob. Okay, I see some people. SpongeBob. All right. Now, last week when we talked about on Monday. On Monday when we talked about the farmer and the rancher, we talked about they want meat and potatoes, right? And we mentioned that people usually like some of everything. So let's say we put Angry Bird and SpongeBob on a production possibility frontier. On one side, you can spend all your money on Angry Birds. On the other hand, you can spend all your money on SpongeBob. Right? This is probably what you would do if you are fans of either. But what if you like both? Then you want to spend money on some of each. Or better yet, buy something that is some of both. So this is a sponge bird, right? It's like a kind of a hybrid between the two. This is actually a Chinese lantern, right? Next Thursday is Mid-Autumn Festival, right? So these kind of products you can find like in toy stores, local toy stores, right? You also have things like a Captain Minion, like Iron Man Minion, like there are a lot of other choices you can have, right? So when there is demand, there is supply. Clearly, there are people who want these type of products, right? Otherwise, you won't see them in production. Now I'm going to talk about utility and demand today. Let's see how much we can cover. Now, how do we tell which one is better? Let's say you like iPhones, right? How do you tell which one is better? Now for iPhone, it's actually easy, right? You have iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6 Plus, and now you have iPhone 7, right? So clearly, the higher the number, the better they are. But now what would be the bad way of trying to figure out what's good, what's better or not? So, HTC's flagship product from 2013 to 2015. In 2013, HTC flagship phone is called HTC One. In 2014, the flagship phone is called HTC One. And in 2015, the flagship phone is also called HTC One. That's a very bad way of telling your customer which one is better, right? Which is why they have given up on doing that, right? Now it's like HTC 10, it's probably going to be HTC 11 and so on. It's just dumb to call everything HTC One. The thing is, number is a very good way of telling people what's good or not. And in economics, we do the same. We want to have a way of saying which is better than what. And in this case, we would use a similar mechanism. A higher number would be better, and that's utility. Utility is the numerical rank of preference, a higher number representing a higher preference. You have iPhone 4, 5, 6. You can represent iPhone 4 with 1, iPhone 5 with 2, and iPhone 6 with 3. Since 3 is bigger than 2 and 2 is bigger than 1, that gives you a way of telling which model this particular customer likes, right? So 3 bigger than 2, so iPhone 6 is better than iPhone 5, and 2 is bigger than 1, so iPhone 5 is better than iPhone 4. Okay, so if the consumer make her choice according to this rank of preference, then she's going to choose iPhone 6. So this is what we have. Now notice that in economics, very often we use a function, right? We use a function. U as a function of iPhone, of a particular model of iPhone, is going to give you some utility. So we express things in the function, which you will see more in a moment, right? And the way it works is you consult the utility function, see what utility value you get from the function for a particular product, and the highest one would be the most preferred. Ideally, utility should be ordinal, meaning that what you care about is which has the highest utility value. Only the order matters and not the exact value. Now an example of that would be, let's say we have iPhone 4, 5, 6 again. Instead of denoting them by 1, 2, 3, what about using 2, 3, 5? 2, 3, 5, let's take a look. 5 is bigger than 3, meaning that iPhone 6 is better than iPhone 5. 3 is bigger than 2, meaning that iPhone 5 is better than iPhone 4. So, even though we're using different numbers, it's representing the same preference. I like iPhone 6 more than iPhone 5 and iPhone 5 more than iPhone 4, right? So it doesn't matter whether you use 1, 2, or 3 to denote the iPhones, or 2, 3, or 5. This is possible because we care about only the ranking, not the actual values. We only want to know which one is higher, which one is lower, which makes this possible. You get the same conclusion, the customer is going to choose iPhone 6. Okay. So, once again, 2, 3, 5, same conclusion. However, in practice, utility is cardinal whenever there's risk or uncertainty. That means, in reality as in when you take more courses, we're not saying what's in people. I'm not saying that that's what in people's mind. Rather, and what I'm saying is, as you take more economic courses, you will realize that utility is very often cardinal. Now the reason is that when you have risks, how do you judge an outcome that is risky? For example, let me give you let's say I offer you the opportunity to take a bet, right? A gamble, right? I'm going to flip a coin. If it's head, you get $2. If it's tail, you get nothing, right? How do you evaluate how good that option is? Half the time you get $2, half the time you get nothing. One possibility is to say, well, half the time I get $2, half the time I get nothing, so on average I get 1, right? So whenever you have risk, you have to do something like taking an average. Sometimes I get $2, sometimes I get nothing, on average I get $1. But that would mean 2 is not the same as 3, 3 is not the same as 4, right? Because the average of 2 and 0 is 1. The average of 5 and 0 would be 2 and 2.5. So when you start taking averages, the value does matter. You can't just say a bigger number is better, because you now start taking average. 2 and 0 versus 5 and 3. Well, that's very different. It's not just about which one is bigger. So when you need to take averages, then the actual value matters. And unfortunately, risk is everywhere, right? Even when you walk out of this building, there's a chance that you get hit by a bus. Then you die. That's risk, right? So risk might be very small, but risk is everywhere. And if you're talking about, let's say, the financial market, risk happens every moment. And you cannot just ignore risk. So in practice, utility is going to be cardinal. The way that we handle this is we try to use some very common functional forms that give you values that we think make sense, which we'll see more often. We'll see more later on. Now, utility, as I said, is usually expressed as a function of relevant stuff. For example, let's say for this particular consumer, the utility of buying an iPhone depends on the number of iPhones, and wealth. And in this particular example, it's going to be wealth plus 5,000 times the number of iPhones. The relevant stuff here are iPhones and wealth. Now, obviously, people care more than just about iPhones and wealth, right? You care about what food you eat, you care about entertainment, you care about investment. We are assuming that everything else does not matter when it's clearly not true. People do care about other things. However, as I mentioned last time, models should be simple. It should only contain enough details to convey your idea. And in this particular instance, you want to ask, when people make decisions in their iPhone, when people make the decision to purchase an iPhone, what's the most important determinant? Well, I think there's a very good argument to say that when people buy iPhones, they care about one, whether they already have an iPhone, and two, how much money they have, right? Everything else is probably secondary to these two numbers. Okay, did it break? No. Right, so a very famous economist, David Romer, he has this quote, we already have a very complicated model of the world itself. As an economist, your job is not to come up with a model that is 100% accurate. Your job is to come up with a model that can explain things with insight. And in this particular case, our insight would be, well, people make trade-off between buying an iPhone and money. So, if you have this functional form, how do you actually use it? What you want to ask is, given a certain amount of wealth and a certain price tag for the iPhone, would this individual purchase the iPhone? So, let's say you face this particular situation, right? He has $6,000 and the iPhone costs $3,880. And we have another situation where the iPhone is going to be $6,000 and, the wealth is $6,000 and the iPhone costs $5,480. What would the individual do? Well, you would have to calculate the values. Now, here's the part where I'm not too sure. Did I actually type the math? If I did, then I can press the next button. If I didn't, then if I press the next button, then go to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to take the chance. I'm going to press the next button. I did. Okay, so what you need to consider is, let's say the consumer does purchase an iPhone. What does he have? You will notice that gender changes when I use examples, right? Sometimes I say he, sometimes I say she. It's even worse. In one of the exams I wrote, I gave a name, something like Enoch or something. Then I start with he, and then in part A, B, C, and then it became a she in D, E, F. And then a student raised his hand and say, Professor, did the consumer just underwent a sex change or something? So unfortunately, when you take especially liberal arts courses, they teach you to try to be it's not gender neutral. It's trying to say, what they say is, whatever that's good, you should use a female pronoun, right? So you should try to use something like she, her, instead of he, so try to get rid of this male dominant thing in the academia, right? In the economics department, you have 9 male professors to 1 female professor. So we try to use female to, so it should be a she. Alright, she. Okay, if she buys an iPhone, she would have to pay $3,880 out of $6,000. That means, so that's the money part, plus, okay, how much utility does he get from one iPhone? 5,000 times 1. So that's 7,120. The other option is not to buy an iPhone. So that's just easy, because $6,000, $1 increases utility by 1. No iPhone, so there's nothing from the second term, so that's 6,000. 6,000 is less than 7,120, so this individual is going to buy the iPhone. Right, so, okay. Did I type the second one? Okay, buying is better. I did. All right, so the second one. Now in this case, the iPhone is more expensive. The iPhone is more expensive. The iPhone is going to cost 5,480, which reduces her wealth after purchase. And it doesn't increase the utility from buying an iPhone, because buying an iPhone increases utility by 5,000 units per iPhone. So in this case, the overall utility from buying an iPhone drops to 5,520, whereas not buying an iPhone remains at 6,000, because that's the utility from keeping $6,000. So this time around, not buying is actually better. So not buying. So you get an idea. You're faced with an amount of wealth, a price tag, put the numbers into the function, calculate the utility. The consumer is supposed to be picking the option with the highest utility. Now, before I go on, I have to emphasize that we're not saying that consumers have a function in their mind when they make purchase, right? I don't think you should try to do some. I don't think you have a function in your mind when you try to decide whether you want to buy an iPhone. Although implicitly you might be weighting the benefit and cost of buying a new iPhone. What we are doing here as economists is that we use a function to approximate what consumers do, right? Given that consumers buy an iPhone at a certain price, what function would give us that result? That's what economists want to do. We use a function to approximate what people do, not that people actually have a function in their mind. That's very different. All right, so it's your turn. I want you to tell me that if the utility function is now wealth plus 2 times root number of apples, and let's say the wealth is 50, would this person buy an apple if the price is $1? And would he buy apples if the price, well, would he buy 4 apples if the price is $1? So this time around, the price is the same, the wealth is the same. What I'm asking you is, what would he buy 1 and would he buy 4? To start you off, I'm going to remind you that what you need is you have to consider the case where she buys and versus the case where she doesn't buy. Let's see. The phone is actually more reliable than my wristwatch, because the wristwatch gets slower as time goes by. Okay, about 10 more minutes. Right, let's talk about this case. Wealth is $3,000. The iPhone costs $3,880. Should this individual buy the iPhone? No? No? Okay, think about the function, the utility function you have above. What would be the utility if the individual buys the iPhone, and what would be the utility if the individual doesn't buy the iPhone? Okay, okay. Please stay on this screen. Buy, not buy. Okay, once again it shows you the answer. Okay, so the thing is, as I write, it also acts as if it's a mouse click. So it shows whatever that's behind. And that's not what it's supposed to do. Well, anyway, if you calculate the utility, I'm just going to describe it by words so that it won't just keep going on to the next, or whatever is next. Right, so if you buy, wealth is 3,000 minus the price 3880. So you have negative 880 in your wealth. You don't have enough money. Plus 5,000 times one iPhone, so that's 5,000 minus 880, so that's 4,120. What if you don't buy the iPhone? Then the wealth is 3,000, and that's it. So it's 4,120 versus 3,000, and 4,120 is higher. So buying is better. What does that mean? That means borrowing, or that means using your credit card, right? Or using your boyfriend's credit card or something. But this is actually a very important question: is do you allow consumers to borrow money? Because that would change decisions by a lot, right? Think about now. If you don't allow consumers to borrow money, what type of purchase would not happen? For an iPhone, you can probably still use cash, but if you do not allow people to borrow money, there's one particular product that you certainly cannot buy. For most people, what would be the most expensive purchase you would make in your life? Buying an apartment, right? Buying a house. Yes, that's exactly right. If your assumption is that consumers cannot borrow money, then you are ruling out buying an apartment. Right? So whether you allow consumers to borrow money would have very real implications on the prediction of your model. Right? So now the typical assumption in economics is that consumers do not get to borrow, at least not explicitly. What we usually do is when we say the consumer has $3,000, we already include all his accessible wealth, including future wealth. That's the meaning of borrowing money. When you borrow money, you're spending future wealth. Now, if you look at it that way, it looks like borrowing money is actually a pretty bad thing to do, right? At least for Chinese, you have this. If I told you, what is borrowing money? What is borrowing money? It's 先使未來錢. Now that sounds so bad, right? But then if you don't have that option, then you don't actually get to, if you don't have the option of borrowing money, you can't buy an apartment. Typically, in economics, we assume that when we say you have a wealth of 3,000, that includes any accessible amount of future wealth, right? So 3,000 is already include your ability to borrow. That's what it means. So typically in economics, you assume consumers cannot go negative, right? When we say $3,000, that really means you can't spend more than 3,000. On the other hand, when we talk about sellers, manufacturers, we usually assume they can borrow as much as they wish. So they can, in the models that describe sellers, we usually allow them to go negative as long as they can make a positive profit at the end. When you study financial markets, going negative is the usual assumption in all models, because going negative in a financial market has actual real purpose. Anyone know what it means to go negative in the stock market? What does it mean? Now, positive would mean you are holding some stocks, right? You buy something, you have a positive amount of stocks. What's the meaning of holding a negative amount of stocks? Anyone actually, did I think I asked this question before, right? Anyone actually buy stocks? Do you know what's the mean? So what would be a behavior that gives you negative number of stocks? Now, holding a negative number of stocks would be short selling. 沽空. Short selling is the behavior where you sell stocks that you do not own. Now, you might be surprised that you can actually do that. Yes, you can do that. The exact mechanism of how it works would be something that you might learn in financial economics. But yes, you can actually sell stocks that you do not own. by borrowing stocks. The way that works is this. The way it works is you want to sell something that you don't have. Why would you want to do that? Because you want the reason why you want to do that is, let's say you think that HSBC is going to become cheaper in 2 months. Now, how can you profit from your prediction that the stock price is going to go down? If you predict the stock price is going to go up, it's easy. You buy the stock price goes up, you sell. That's how you make money. But what if you predict that the stock is going to go down? The way you make money is you short sell it. You sell stocks that you do not have. When the stock price actually goes down, you buy it back and return the stock. Right? That's how it works. In Hong Kong, it's not easy to short sell. But if you are from, let's say, the United States or Europe, somewhere where you can return products, even when you buy them from like department stores, short selling is actually kind of doing things like that is kind of easy, right? Like it's a similar behavior as if, let's say, you really want. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, you could have, let's say, you calculate all the different points for every price level and every quantity. Practically, that has to be done with calculus. So let's just say you already calculated all the utility levels at different price and level and different quantity. So what would you have? You have something like this. Let's say we put the diagram where you have price on the vertical axis and quantity. You calculate different points, and if you take a look, you would have an idea of how many iPhones or whatever product we're talking about the consumer wants at a given price level. This relationship is called demand curve. Now, obviously, if you only have 4 points, it doesn't look like a curve. But if you calculate many points, then you would have a curve, right? You would have a curve. That's called demand curve. It gives you the relationship between how many units the consumer wants to buy as the price changes. The amount the consumer wants to buy is called quantity demand, and the combination of different quantity demands the consumer wants is called a demand curve. The demand curve, as you see here, is usually downward sloping because if people are in their right mind, they usually buy less as things get more expensive. If anything, you have less money to spend anyway, right? So you should be your ability to afford the product would go down. Okay, this is now the time to check. Oh, we are time's up, so we're going to stop here. Yeah, so demand curve can be defined for individual, for a group. Okay, and so we're going to talk about this again next week. All right. Oh wow. So, what do I want to ask? How many of you have not yet enrolled in this course? Anyone? Not yet? I think we are already on the wait list, so you should better be hurry. Well, yeah, so I think I should kick out people who are enrolled but not in class, right? We have a lot of empty chairs, so which means there should be someone not coming. So, well, anyway, get on the wait list first. First, correction, because one of you came to me after class saying that the diagram I drew, there's actually something wrong with the diagram I drew, and that was correct. The diagram so last time we calculated these utility numbers, and in the and I think we actually calculated that for 4 apples, it's actually as good as not buying, right? Buying 4 apples gives the same utility as not buying, and then I drew a diagram. So, all right, the diagram, you have price, you have quantity, not price, this is utility. And through it goes up and down, right? The utility first go up as you buy more and then goes back down. And I labeled this as 4. This is incorrect. This should be 1. I'm not sure actually it's 1. I actually didn't calculate all of them. But this should not, I wrote 4. It shouldn't be 4. It should be something else. I actually have to calculate that because that might be 2 or 3. But 0 and 4 have the same utility. Somewhere in between you're actually going to be happier. But I'm not sure. You have to calculate every single value to be sure whether it's 1, 2, or 3. Okay? So the diagram it has the same shape, but it should not be 4 in the top, in the highest point. It should be something else. And 4 has the same utility as 0. So that's a correction to the diagram. So utility, blah, 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 blah. We talk about budget constraint. Demand curve, well, so if you calculate the utility for every single level, right? So at every single price level, then you would know what the individual wants to buy. The individual would buy the amount that gives him or her the highest utility. So you do that for every single point, for every single price, then you get an idea of what the individual would buy at every point. That's what, so given the price. So that's quantity demand. The amount the individual wants to buy at a certain price level. You do that for all the possible points. That gives you a demand curve. Now in this course, we like to draw demand as a straight line. Why? It's for the same reason that economists use in their mathematical models. The reason that it's a straight line is that it's easy to work with. Mathematically, it's easy. There's absolutely no reason why it has to be a straight line. In fact, if you think about it, straight line often doesn't make any sense. What does a straight line imply? A straight line implies that at a certain point, so when the price is 0, the demand is still limited. So it keeps going down for a constant demand. At a price 0, it reaches a certain degree, quantity, right? Maybe 100 or 10,000, something like that. Now, if something is truly, if the price is truly so low, you would imagine demand would keep going up faster and faster, right? It makes sense that as things becomes cheaper, more and more people want it. If it's really 0, why don't you get it first, Lord or Scene, right? Why do you, if it's the price of an iPhone is 0, how many do you want? Dude, I'll take any, like give me 10,000 iPhones, like something like that. So there's no reason why to believe that the demand has to be a straight line. It's more likely going to be a curve. But a curve is hard to work with without calculus. So in this course, we use straight lines. So here's the problem. In the real world, we don't really know what people's utility function is. Utility is something economists comes up with to describe the preference people have. As an economist, I assign a higher number to the bundle of stuff that you like more. But do you actually have such a number in mind? Probably not. So what do? Previously, I went from a utility function to a demand curve. In reality, you don't have the utility function. How do you get the demand curve? So that requires demand estimation, which is an empirical exercise. It involves using data. And one possibility is you can actually sell something. For example, if you want to figure out what's the better way to figure out how much a painting is worth? Well, look at auctions, right? Look at painting auctions that give you an idea how much people are willing to pay. How many hands are raised when you auction off a painting at a certain price. So that's possible, but that's impractical for some other items. For example, a new product. You have, let's say you have an idea. You come up with a new type of shampoo or something, or a new type of a new cell phone, which doesn't exist yet. How do you know how much you can charge? How does Apple know how much it can charge for an iPhone when the iPhone hasn't come out yet? You can't sell an iPhone before it actually is released. So the use of existing purchase record is very common in marketing research. So for example, in Hong Kong, the marketing research company Nielsen offer a service called Nielsen Home Scan. So how does it work? The way it works is Nielsen, the company, has around 1,500 families in Hong Kong in their payroll. So they pay the families money, and in return, the families keep track of all their purchases. Right? So it's called home scan because every family is given a barcode scanner. So every time you go to buy groceries, buy whatever you need, you scan the barcode and type in the price and how many units you purchase. If it's products that you don't have barcodes, then you have to write it down in a notebook. So these families are paid, right? So that's why they're willing to do that. So they keep track of all their purchase records, and Nielsen used this record to help its customers to determine what price would be the most appropriate for their products. So that's the way it works. Now, individual companies also have their own programs, Octopus Reward and Parking Shop Money Back. Why would the companies be willing to offer you discounts and like bonuses for free? All you need to do is just show the card, the bonus card. Why? Well, it's not really free. You're in effect exchanging your purchase records for the bonuses, right? If without Octopus Reward and Parking Shop Money Back, without these kind of programs, it will be a lot more difficult for companies to know what you have purchased over time. Especially if you use cash, right? How does the company know it's the same person? It doesn't. So many years ago, companies have realized that a good way of keeping track of customers' purchase history is to offer you some tiny amount of reward. Then you'll be involuntarily give up your privacy and willing to let the company know how much you purchase. The company in return know how much discount is needed in order to attract you to buy more. That allows it to maximize its profit. These days, I think people are very used to selling their own privacy, right? Whenever you log on to Facebook, you are basically selling everything of yourself to Facebook. So that's how company actually figures out what demand you have by keeping track of your purchase records. The reason why using a straight line demand is not too big of a problem is that for demand, the most important idea to remember is that it's downward sloping. When price goes up, you buy less. That's the most important part you have to remember. This is called the law of demand. 需求定律，需求什麼什麼 I don't know. 定律 something. So, law of demand sounds very reasonable. The more expensive it is, you buy less. But then, almost immediately, you can think of violations. For example, our cost textbook, which you don't need to buy, so the cost textbook sells for 350 Hong Kong dollars in our bookstore, around that amount, but over $1,300 in the United States. It's exact same content, but it's like 4 times more expensive. Nevertheless, students in the United States are much more likely to buy a textbook than students in Hong Kong. If I'm teaching the same course in the United States, almost everyone will have a textbook. Is that a violation of law of demand? Price is 4 times higher in the United States, but then a lot more students buy textbook. Is that violating the law of demand? So it looks like the more expensive it is, the more textbook gets sold. To understand whether this is in fact a violation, you just have to think about what would you do? What would you do if the price is in fact 4 times higher? Right? Any one of you actually purchase a textbook? Probably not, right? Because I already told you it's not required. But, well, a lot of you are in the math course, right? How many of you are in the math course? How many of you actually purchase a textbook? Some of you, right? Will you purchase a textbook if it's like 4 times more expensive? No, right? So that tells you it's not a violation. Because if the textbook is actually 4 times more expensive in Hong Kong, no one will buy the textbook. Even the few of you who actually purchase the textbook right now. So that tells you it's not a violation. And that means we have to ask the question, what's different in the United States that makes the student much more likely to buy textbook? Right? So before I ask someone actually from the United States, so let's ask the student from Hong Kong why they think it's more likely that students in the United States buy textbooks. The textbooks are published in the United States. We only use United States textbooks. Tradition, that's hard to say, right? Why would there be a tradition of buying textbooks? Although I would say maybe at some point, yeah, it could be like enormous and Hong Kong you go cheap and don't buy textbooks. What else? Can you think of what would be the difference between what would be different between Hong Kong and the United States? Income. That's a good point, right? Income. United States meet the average income in the United States is higher than Hong Kong. So that's true. So that's one reason. But I think that's not the strongest reason. The strongest reason has to do with how you see the cost of buying a textbook. Now, if you think about it, how much does it cost you? How much does it cost you to study in CUHK for a year? How much do you pay? 40,000 Hong Kong dollars. And the textbook is like $400, so that's 100, that's like 1%, right? So a simple textbook will be 1% of the tuition. How much does it cost to study study for a year in university in the United States? How much does it cost? Do you know? 60,000 US. Depends on which state you are. If you're in California, yeah, it will be 60,000. If you're basically private schools would charge that amount. If you're in state schools these days, maybe something like 20 to 30,000. Right? So we're talking about 60,000 US dollars. Right? That's 480,000 Hong Kong dollars for a single year of university education. What is $1,322 when it compares to 480,000? So textbook is relatively cheap in the United States compared to tuition, right? Like it's like chump change, like it's just so tiny amount. So that's why. As a third reason, I would say there's a third reason, which I think is not as important in Hong Kong, but it's very important in mainland China. In fact, you can say textbook adoption in China is very high. It's just that it's not the official textbook. On Taobao, you can get like a photocopy textbook for like $50. So in mainland, most students would have their own textbooks. It's just not the official version, right? So it's not a violation. In law of demand, there is this condition. Whenever you say law of demand, that when you say that people buy less when price goes up, or when you say people buy more when price goes down, it always comes with a condition. All other things being equal. Or sometimes we call it ceteris paribus, so it's Latin. So it's all other things being equal. You must be considering the same scenario. The only thing that has changed is price. So in this particular example, income has changed, tuition has changed. That completely changed the picture. for a university student in the United States, $1,000 doesn't feel like that much because they're already paying over $400,000 for their tuition. For you, it feels a lot more. Now, law of demand is very strong. It's a very strong effect. On September 2011, the Swiss Central Bank announced a minimum exchange rate of 1.2 Swiss franc to 1 euro. Now, why is that significant? Well, because it's an over 9% depreciation in the Swiss franc in just one night. Here's the diagram. So this is the exchange rate from August 31st to September 6th of 2011. This is the amount of Swiss franc you can purchase per euro, right? So I didn't show you like longer series because otherwise you won't be able to see this change very clearly. But basically, what was happening is that the Swiss franc is appreciating in value. As you see, on August 31st, you can get about 1.356 Swiss franc per euro. By the time you reach, this is I think right before the change. This is something like the 5th, right? Right before the change, you can get only 1.1 Swiss franc per euro. So Swiss franc has become more expensive. And then the central bank announced this policy, and overnight, Swiss franc become way cheaper. Now you can get 1.2, which is basically the official rate. Now, why would the Swiss central bank want to depreciate its currency overnight so much? What would be the effect of doing that? If a company, if a store announce that you can get the same number of products for cheaper, what do you call that? It's a sale, right? So this is in effect a sale at the country level, right? When you depreciate your currency, it's a very quick way of making every product of your country on sale. Overnight, Swiss product becomes 10% cheaper relative to products elsewhere. So this would increase the demand for Swiss products. So this leads to a policy, this leads to a exchange rate policy, which you would call which would call comparative depreciation. When every country tries to do the same, you would just keep that. I would lower my exchange rate, you lower your exchange rate, and everyone keeps going. Then in the end, nothing will be achieved. But then it's very hard to resist trying to make your currency cheaper than your neighbor, because that would increase demand for your product. So it's not surprising that Swiss is not the only one doing that. It's not in Japan. Abenomics has been going on for some while. And the Japanese central bank depreciates the yen since like 2013. This is done by how do you depreciate your currency? Now, in English, in layman terms, we like to say you're printing money, right? You're printing money. Now, in reality, in modern economics, you don't actually print physical paper money, paper notes. You don't do that. Everything is done electronically. What the central bank does is essentially telling all commercial banks, you have X more money. Now go use it in some way. Usually means lending it out. That's how modern economy prints money. The central bank simply says, we have this much more money in the banking system. So this is what you would learn in macroeconomics. Now, when the policy came out, it's actually very effective. Very effective. So this is a news article from Japanese Times in 2013, May. Right? Foreign visitors to Japan jumped 18% from a year earlier to like over 3 million, according to the Japanese National Tourism Board. and the industry is so lacking people that they are crying out for more manpower. It's a very strong effect. And you are in the class, this is a class in the first term. So if you're in the second term, it's actually somewhat more interesting sometimes because we have exhibition in April, where the second year and the fourth year students would have to design a poster presenting their original research on a specific economic topic. 2 years ago, I think one of the groups of second year students, they wrote they did a project on the impact of yen, the exchange rate of yen to Hong Kong dollar, on the number of tourists from Hong Kong to Japan. You know how many tourists, you know what's the number of tourists from Hong Kong to Japan every year? It's like 1.5 million last year. It's probably on course to over 2 million this year. You know how many people there are in Hong Kong? We have 7 million people. So we have almost 1 in 3. Well, obviously there are people who goes to Japan like twice or 3 times a year, right? So, but still, 200 million tourists from Hong Kong to Japan in a single year is pretty amazing when we talk about a city of 7 million, right? It's very cheap to go to Japan. In fact, I think if you take like those discount airlines, it only costs you like 2,000 Hong Kong dollars, sometimes even less than 1,000 Hong Kong dollars going to Japan, right? You can even go there, eat some sushi and come back. It's still worthwhile. Because sushi, it could be very expensive in Hong Kong. So it's very strong effect initially. But if you read the news recently, that it basically the policy is losing steam. It's not working very well. It's not boosting the GDP as much as the government wants it to. Now, why? Okay. So this policy, as I said, the policy works by you make your things cheaper in hope of attracting more customers. So the first part, the second part does work, attracting more customers. Many people are visiting Japan. But there is a problem with this method. Think about it. If going on sale is so effective in generating income, why not we go on to sell, let's say, 100% off, right? 95% off. Wouldn't that be most effective? It's certainly going to attract a lot of people coming to your store. But what's the problem? Why not go on? Like, why most stores will give you something like maybe 10% off, 20% off. No one ever gives you like 95% off. Why not?
Does it not make a profit?
Well, yeah, exactly. How do you make money? You're supposed to make money if you're selling something that's worth 100 at $5. So that's the same problem facing by Japan. By continuously depreciating your currency, you just make your citizens poor. And poor people don't spend money. So you are essentially trading off between foreigners spending money in Japan and local Japanese spending money. And local Japanese are relatively poor compared to like 2 decades ago. So they're not spending money. So now, when you study macroeconomics, you see that it's very hard to use the same policy for many, many years and expect it to still work. Because people come to adapt to it, and the negative side effects become stronger. Something very similar to the demand curve is called the angle curve. Now, the angle curve is the relationship between income and quantity demand, right? Law of demand, demand curve is the relationship between price and quantity demand. Given the price, how much do you want to buy? Angle curve is the relationship between income and quantity. All right, so what's the relationship between income and quantity? Do you buy more or less as you get richer? More, that's what you would think, right? Okay, right? Let's say when you're like earn a low income, you eat McDonald's every single day. When you earn more income, you eat more McDonald's every single day. Well, how far can that go? Probably as you get richer, eventually you will start eating something nicer. I hope that's the case for your health. say, right? You start eating something nicer. So far, it's true that the more you earn, the more you buy. Although the category of stuff you buy probably expand as you get richer. However, it's conceivable that as you become really rich, you actually start reducing your McDonald's consumption and start eating more fancy cuisine, right? So it's not clear that it has to be the case that you must spend more on every product as you get richer. You only eat 3 meals a day. In Hong Kong, actually, that's not true. In Hong Kong, we eat 5. Breakfast, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, night snack. You can have all 5 of that on campus too. Just next door in CC canteen, right? So even then, there's a limit on how many meals you can eat in a single day, which means at some point you have to start substituting between different products. If you have the money to eat more French cuisine, you have to reduce your consumption of McDonald's. So it's not true that for every single product you would spend more as you get richer. So there is no law of demand equivalent for Engelberg. There's nothing that says that, oh, as you get richer, you always buy more of every single product. You don't. Right? So for desirable, nice dinner, you probably expect that as your income goes up, you buy more. But for something like McDonald's, maybe you start eating less as you get richer. Although that depends completely on your preference. In our department, if you're an economics student, then you will soon come to know there's a particular teacher who really likes McDonald's. He eats 3 meals a day in McDonald's. Yeah. It's your task to figure out who that is. You know very soon. Once again, all these are only true under the condition that everything else is equal. What do we mean by that? Now, when we talk about demand, we say that, okay, price goes up, you buy less, but only if your income stays the same. Only if your income stays the same. Here, we are changing income. So what we are saying is that the price stays the same. When your income goes up and the price stays the same, what happens? You buy more. All right? You buy more. Will you buy a car at your current income? Probably not, unless you are really rich. I don't know. In Hong Kong, students obviously don't own a car when they are a student, but in Texas, you drive a pickup, maybe you drive a pickup truck to high school. That's a very different world. But in Hong Kong, you don't. Maybe if you earn $30,000, you would buy a car, like a small car, not a big one even. Like this is a Honda Jazz. Some of you will buy a car, some of you don't. Well, I think if you reach the income of $300,000 a month, you probably buy a car, maybe 2 even. Although in that case, you probably not owning maybe like a Ferrari or something, right? Like that's what you want when you have a $300,000 income per month. Now in Hong Kong, driving is very expensive. Buying the car is not expensive. You can actually get a second-hand Ferrari for maybe less than $1 million Hong Kong dollars. The difficulty is, first, parking space is very expensive. Like $5,000 a month just for parking space. So that's a lot of expenses. Then fixing the car is very expensive. Like gasoline is very expensive. In Hong Kong, gasoline is these days is about 14 to 15 Hong Kong dollars per liter. That's $2 per liter. You get, and 1 gallon is 3 liters. $2 per liter. Think about that. That's a ridiculous amount. It's very. If you're in Hong Kong, you don't know, but if you go elsewhere in other countries, you realize gasoline is typically very cheap. Hong Kong is very expensive. So it's very expensive to own a car in Hong Kong. So it's definitely desirable. And so in cases where demand goes up as people get richer. So when the quantity demand goes up when people get richer, we call that a normal good. Like it's normal. As you get richer, you want it more. That's why it's normal.
The opposite is things like low quality food and clothing, like fake handbags. You can get these kind of stuff in Hong Kong. Although I'll say it's cheaper to go to get it like in Shenzhen, right? They have these really good, like it looks really real. So these are called inferior goods. When things that when you get richer, you start buying less. I think fake handbags are a very good example. At some point, like when a $6,000 handbag sounds not too much different from a $600 handbag when your income is high enough, right? If you're earning something like $60,000 or $70,000 a month, then the difference is not very huge. The real thing and the fake one, right? When you're studying in secondary school, obviously you have to go for the fake one, unless you have a very rich family or a very rich boyfriend.